Check this shit out.
When you start getting deep into collecting for the Nintendo Entertainment System, it starts to become very clear which games are common and which ones are rare. Beyond the you could probably buy a house for that price titles like the Nintendo World Championships and Stadium events, the big two in terms of rarity and priciness have always been Little Samson and Flintstone's Surprise at Dinosaur Peak. But if those are the two bright suns of the NES library, there's tons of large planets orbiting them that still command a hefty price tag. Titles like Panic Restaurant, Bonk's Adventure, Kid Clown, and of course today's deep cut game worth discussing, Power Blade 2. As the number 2 implies, Power Blade 2 is the second in the series, and since the original Power Blade isn't maybe as well known as other titles like DuckTales or Bubble Bobble, which both got late era ultra rare sequels, it probably makes sense to start with the OG a bit before discussing its successor. Power Blade is, at its heart, a clone of Mega Man, incorporating elements like the level select, the boss fights, and just the general feel of gameplay. However, instead of cartoony graphics and settings, Power Blade goes for a much more realistic design, where every stage feels like you're a rogue military agent on an infiltration mission. Also, instead of gaining new abilities, you instead perpetually upgrade your boomerang with stars that increase your distance, additional booms that let you throw multiple rangs at a time, and of course the titular Power Blade, which is a bonus armor that allows you to shoot in all directions. Something that's often mocked about this game is the cover, where they obviously co-opted a shot of Arnold Schwarzenegger from Terminator. Love it. I guess they thought selling the game as Arnold-like would bring in all the dollars, even though your in-game hero looks more like an 80s Coke dealer who drives a Camaro and only dates high schoolers. The stages are designed with diverging paths, forcing you to explore a bit to find the Power Blade suits, but more importantly find the contacts placed in each level that give you a keycard in order to access the boss area. After you meet up and touch tips, they always say, "Psst, you must be Nova." Like, no shit, you see any other blonde buzzcut dudes chucking boomerangs out here? Also, why are you whispering? You're right out here in the open, everyone can see you. Are there really any secrets to be concealed? Overall, Power Blade is a lot of fun, and despite its obvious influences, it's one of the best platformers on the system, often mentioned in the top 50 or so NES games. A sequel, Power Blade 2, was released in 1992, a year after the Super Nintendo was out in North America. On the surface, it is very similar to its predecessor, featuring a buzzcut, tank top rocking, boomerang tossing cool guy chopping up robots. But if you dig a little deeper, it's actually a very different game. You can still pick your stage at will, but there's only 4 this time, and you can only do so by ever so slowly floating between them on your totally necessary hover bike. Fuck yeah, just oozing sauce. At first I thought Power Blade was insanely hard, like Castlevania 3 levels of difficulty. The platforming is really frustrating, some enemies are near impossible to avoid, and the boss fights are supremely unfairly challenging. But then I realized that I had actually been approaching this game incorrectly, and even though there's a level select option, the stages actually ramp up in difficulty from 1 to 4. So just start with the first choice, and as you grab these special suits, certain challenging sections are now way easier to traverse, and boss fights go from stupidly impossible to impossibly stupid. Once you beat all 4 levels, you can move on to this factory that makes pulsating buttholes? Sexy! After that, it's on to the top secret stage 6, where you face off against all the bosses in a gauntlet, followed by the easiest main boss in video game history. See ya! I didn't even mention the story, which sees a mega corporation trying to blackmail the government into buying some kind of cyborg, so they send Nova in to investigate. Turns out that the evil executives are actually evil aliens, and we've got to shut them down before their cyborgs take over the world. Still not sure what that has to do with getting the government to pay for it, but whatever. The best part is that inexplicably the whole game takes place on Christmas Eve, and at the end the credits play over an 8-bit rendition of Silent Night. What a choice. Despite being a sequel, I actually think Power Blade 2 looks way worse. Like, not atrocious, just kinda bland. All the levels appear kind of generically the same, the colors are much more drab and muddled, and there's none of the oddball enemies or bosses from the first title. It controls virtually the same as Power Blade 1, except now Nova can slide, a move that is not at all necessary. The two main changes to the formula are both the best and worst thing about the sequel. The level design in 2 is much worse, opting for more of a straightforward run the gauntlet approach of attrition, where each mini-stage is a series of death traps leading to another mini-stage full of even harder death traps. Gone is the searching and backtracking in favor of a layout more comparable to something like Castlevania, mixed with supervillain murder machines. This style of all or nothing stacks of levels is fine, but considering how fun and free the original Power Blade felt to run around and explore, the stages in 2 feel much more constrained and claustrophobic. The other big change in 2, the suits, is actually pretty cool, allowing you to use a magic meter of sorts in order to exploit their massively overpowered abilities. Each of these is unlocked by beating an optional mini-boss in each level, and I say optional because I didn't even realize that's what these doors were the first time I played. The Newt suit lets you climb on ceilings, the wetsuit makes swimming easier, the rocket suit lets you fly, and the Patriot suit gives you better defense. As I mentioned before, the game is incredibly difficult, but once you realize the suits are basically a Game Genie code, certain brutal sections can now be avoided entirely. Not only that, but the bosses have a less pronounced Mega Man style weakness to particular suits, meaning you no longer have to be a straight up wizard to take them down with ease. Overall, yeah, I don't recommend Power Blade 2, at all. It's not the worst action platformer by far, but compared to some of the better titles on the system, and especially its primary influences in the original Power Blade and the Mega Man games, it just doesn't measure up. The developers made a bold choice to alter the gameplay from its predecessor, not so much as to be completely unrecognizable like Zelda 2, but enough to be not very fun like Double Dragon 3. The whole game feels like an unfair grind, and with so many better and cheaper options out there, it's an easy one to forget about. Hey y'all, if you like my channel, I'm posting additional exclusive videos over at patreon.com/bigolwords. I've been enjoying creating content with a wider focus beyond just the NES, so if you want to see more of that, and also give me some support, I've linked to my Patreon page in the comments. I'm also streaming a random game every Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on YouTube, so come and hang out. Until next time, thanks for watching.